Not that there's anything wrong with that artistic suite.
Tony, I'm not getting anything.
Oh, you know what? It would help if I turned on my video, huh?
My screen is frozen.
Hold on. Okay, can you guys see my mouse moving?
Uh-huh. I see that lovely blouse.
Yeah, see? This is what I'm talking about for embroidery and glaze. It's the, teardrops, and then it's those little eyelets. For the eyelets, you can use an eyelet punch, which just makes it so much easier. Even if there's a little bit of fabric around it, it'll just kind of wear away, right? The ovals are what I'm talking about. You either have to use that cutting system from the artistic suite and those cutting needles, or you're going to get an X-Acto knife, and I'll show you how to set that up. So we're going to kind of cover these things through these 3 series and until we kind of come up with this neat little pattern that we can put on something. Okay, now what else I want to show you, you probably can't see that. Let me see if I can zoom in. Okay, this is Organdy, the cotton Organdy I was talking about. Okay, it's very stiff. You can see they've cut the edges and there's really not much fraying, but it allows you to put these stitches on it and then cut it out, and it you can see that edge is not perfect, right? And one of the things I had to kind of get over is I'm used to that perfect edge. You're trying to trim and trim and trim, and what ends up happening is you catch your satin stitches and and cut them loose, right? So when we do this with scallops or with these points, don't worry if there's a few little stragglers here. Don't be so perfectionistic about cutting. You need to not cut your stitches. Okay, now this is a modern look on embroidery and glaze. Okay, you can see this is very intricate. This is going to be your homework, Nancy.
No.
I'm just joking.
Not at my house.
But you see how these, circles and ovals are down here, right?
Right.
You can see here, it's not intricately all cut out, but it's still the same principle. She's got some ovals, she's got some circles, and they're making flowers. And they've put this over top of, a sheer fabric or, a skin-colored fabric. And that's a more modern update on, or in this case, actually, they put the sheer fabric over top of the dress. But this is a more modern take on embroidery and glaze. Okay, this, I wanted to show you our built-in stitches in the motifs, and that's what we're going to look at first. Let me zoom in. This was done with a very large wing needle, and it was done with 50 weight cotton quilting thread, actually, from Signature. I didn't have any thread breaks until I got to this pattern, and when we cover these, I'm going to tell you why I had thread breaks. This one, the second one, is beautiful. This one's okay. But these are the built-in motifs. This one needed some serious updating, and to me, this one is just So we don't have, like in the Expressive software, there are a few more stitches that you could use instantly. But the nice thing about this program is that you can make your own motifs here, so we can actually make our own wing needle designs and other things. And let me double check what's in there. This is what we're going to complete at the end of it, at least part of what we're going to complete. And this is going to be our embroidery and glaze. And then we're going to add some things to it, okay? And I'll save the rest of these for later. All right, let me get over to this. Now, I'm going to start with lines because Nancy, I know, and Barbara, you guys took the webinars last year, but how much have you used the software since? And Shirley, I'm going to type you a question. Basically, how much have you used the software as well, Shirley?
I've used it.
Okay. Nancy?
I've done a few things.
Well, that's good. So you guys kept up to date a little bit. That's good. And
well, I wouldn't go that far.
You didn't forget everything I taught you, right?
No, no, I did that family crest,
Oh, yeah,
and I
yeah,
did
that's
do
right.
the multi-hooping.
Oh, good,
I
okay.
did multi-hooping, which that class was a big, big help.
Oh, good, okay, good. All right. Um, okay, I'm not sure how much experience Shirley has, but we're going to do a little line review, okay, before we go on, because what we're going to do as we go through the whole series is we're going to cover the basics again as we go into each one of these sessions. So rather than like torture you with all of the basics at one time, which can be kind of like watching paint dry, right? We're going to just cover a few in each session. So here is our line option. Okay, if you touch these little black arrows, they're going to swing out your menu. Okay, this is your standard line. It's a single running line. This is going to be your triple run line, or what's called a beam stitch. Sorry, this is called a sculpture line. This is the one you can use invisible thread in the top and create a hand look quilt stitch. Okay, this is your motif line, and that's where you're going to apply those patterns, and we're going to cover a lot of that. This is your candle wicking line, and we're going to look at that as well, because candle wicking and heirloom kind of go hand in hand. Like maybe you don't want to pay $8 billion for Swiss dot. Well, you could make kind of like a faux Swiss dot portion. You could put some polka dots on with this. And the back stitch line. And then this is your stem stitch line. We're going to kind of ignore that back stitch line for the most part with this, but we are going to look at this stem stitch line. Okay, now, I'm going to start with your single run line. If you remember in the program, I left click for a straight line, for a straight point, right? Right click if I want a curve. And if I want a straight line, I hold the control key. See how it's going straight even when I angle it? Okay, so I'm going to hold the control key and left click again. And I press enter to make my line. Okay, now this is just a single run line. I'm going to go up to this icon, which is, the reshape icon is what it's called. You can see it's got the nodes on it. But what it gives me is my in and out points and the ability to edit, like the shape of something. Okay, now this little plus symbol over here is my end point. This diamond is where my stitching starts. So in a run line, if I start over here, I'm going to automatically end over here. Just because I move this to maybe the middle does not mean that that's what's going to happen. Okay, it's a run line. It just runs from here to here. It's not going to backtrack for me. Okay, do you guys remember that?
Yes.
Okay, so, and if you forget that, take off your little sunglasses here. These are the rose-colored glasses. Remember the rose-colored glasses that, makes everything look so wonderful in embroidery? So I'm going to turn those off. So I'm out of, that realistic view. I'm going to zoom in, and to control zoom, I touch the B, like boy key on my keyboard, and I drag around where I want to zoom. Okay, so there's my line right now. I'm going to go and see this little flower icon. It says slow redraw.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to show you, remember I moved my out point right there, right? And I'm going to slow this down. Watch what happens. Even though I've moved that point, this is what's going to happen. Okay, it's just going straight across. There's no pause. There's no nothing. And it's not going to backtrack for me. Okay, no backtrack over to here. So it doesn't matter where I move that out point. It's not going to make any difference. This is a line. The program sees it as a line, and it's not going to backtrack just because I decided to move that point over to the middle. Okay, see? It ends here whether I like it or not. And you can tell by that. See that little plus symbol right here?
Yes.
Okay, that is my last stitch. Since I only have one line, that's my last stitch. right, so that's my single line. Now, the advantage of the single line is really simple. If I'm using this, I can create motifs and control them, and I know what they're going to do, you know, because a motif is going to do the same thing. It's going to start here, and it's going to end here. Okay, I'm going to just go ahead and, this is my select. So, see, I've got the little points here selecting it, right? And I'm just going to go over to here, and I'm going to change it to a bean stitch. And it's the same thing with the triple run. Okay, if I go, this is my properties. If I go and I look, my line stitch is a triple run. 2.0 to me is a very short stitch length. 2.5 to 3 is a good stitch length. And remind me next webinar, I'll show you how to set defaults. But I want you to play with this and decide what you like first, okay? So 2.0, or yeah, 2.0, 2 millimeters is a little short to me. But you can see it's a triple run line. Again, I'm going to leave the triple run line here, go up to my reshape. Let me select this first, make sure it's selected, go to reshape. I'm not sure why it's not letting me get to the reshape. Hold on. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Okay, here's my reshape. Oh, you know why? Because I selected an icon. Sorry. Forgot about that. Okay, there is my reshape. Even if I move this point now, okay, I'm going to move that over there. And I'm going to go back to the slow redraw. You can see what happens with this now. Okay, there goes my line. This is not actually going to stitch. That's going to be my jump. But you can see what it's doing. It goes forward, backward, forward. That is called a bean stitch. And it's a very dramatic outline. It's also much more precise than trying to go twice around something. But I moved my out point over to here again, and you can see it's not going to let me do that.
It's going to keep right on going straight.
Mm-hmm. Right, it's not going to backtrack. The lines in this do not behave like lines in some of the other programs. The logic is if you made a line from here to here, that must be what you want.
Right.
Okay, so and it's going to be the same for the rest of the lines as well. Okay, that's going to be the logic. So as long as you remember that, you know, you'll know, like, if you need to make a line, you know, if you, for whatever reason, need to start here and come out to here, you're going to have to come back. You know, you'll see what I mean when we get to motifs. But, okay, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell this line right now to become a motif line. This is my motif run line. As soon as I select it, I can just click on this line and it should turn it into a motif line. Hold on. I'm having one of those bad program days. I sat here playing with this all day long and it was fine and it worked just fine. So we'll start. There we go. Okay, there's my default motif. That is a nice little sweet little flower, right? However, it's a nice little motif, but I want you to bear something in mind as we get started on the motifs in the program. I'm going to touch the B key and I'm going to zoom in, and do you see all those little teeny tiny stitches right here?
Yes.
Okay, you are not going to want to make anything with these curves to it smaller than what the program default gives you. Like, this will stitch okay. To me, those little stitches would, you know, you're going to hear it on your machine, but they'll form okay. But you're not going to want to make this like 4 millimeters. You know, if you go into your properties, you're not going to want to change this from 25 millimeters. You know, if I change this even to like, you know, 15 millimeters, that to us seems very large, right? But that would be a nightmare for my machine to stitch. Those are very, very, very short stitches. Okay?
So what do you do?
When it's something that the program has, you know, a default setting for, like on this, the default that automatically created it was at 25. I tend to pay attention to that, especially when I see those curves. Okay? Because you figure there's, there's all these little floral ones. Like the same thing with this. I don't want to make it any smaller than what the program tells me. I can make it bigger. That's not going to be a problem. I can make it bigger within a reasonable amount of, size. Because, look, all those little teeny tiny stitches, they're going to stitch just fine if I make it bigger, right? But making it smaller, that's just going to be, those little tiny stitches that make your machine sound like a machine gun? That's what you're going to get. So, all right, so we've kind of played with the default motifs with the flowers. Now we're going to look at the ones that were in that scan. Remember I showed you that scan? Those are the French knots. Let me go back. Okay, this scan of my test stitches.
Right.
Okay, we're going to take a look at these because to me this did not form the way it should have, and I'm going to explain why. I'm going to explain why this one, it's hard to see in the scan, I guess. I probably should have used maybe a different color thread. Why this one looks so good and this one ate my thread. You can see the looping here. And why this one looks just okay. Okay, I'm going to show you those and then I'm going to explain why they look the way they look. When your
stitches are close together.
On the one, it's because on this one, it's because you just kept dropping into the same hole with too many stitches close together. With this one, the default size, I made it a little bit bigger than the default size, but I'm going to show you how to remake this so that there's a little more drama to it. And this one's just wonderful because you're doing exactly what you need to do for wing needle here. This one needed a little more beef to it. So we're going to go through and I'm going to show you how to make your own motifs. But before I get rolling, Shirley, do you have any questions or anything? So we have to get her mic working because she says she's very quiet. And I explained to her that you were not quiet, Nancy. And of course, you would get her talking, right?
Shirley, you better get your ass and get that thing to go. Do you hear me?
She will. She's going to look for another headset. No questions. Okay. Nancy is very outgoing. You'll come to love her dearly. All right.
Oh,
now.
Yes. Barbara, I hope I didn't embarrass you.
No, you didn't embarrass me. I worked with sailors.
Oh, I know it. I love it. My daddy was a commander in the Navy. So.
That's my husband was. Yep.
Was he ever stationed in Virginia Beach?
Nope. No, he was on the West Coast in New Orleans and Pennsylvania, pretty much, and he deployed. He was a SEAL.
You guys ready?
Was he ever in, what's the place in Pennsylvania? Willow Grove. Was he ever at Willow Grove, Pennsylvania?
No. No.
Okay, you guys ready?
Harrisburg.
All right, I got to kind of rush you out of that. Okay, now we're going to look at some of the stitches that are built in. In the motif lines, it says EMB Gallery. There's also a select button here. If you click on the select button, you get this little window. To me, this is easier than clicking on this and trying to figure out what the heck these all are. Or, getting out your book and trying to figure out what they are. This one might be interesting for wing needle. Okay, but I'm going to explain what you have to look for. Okay, I'm going to go back to select. And as you look through these, you have to think in terms of this. The whole point of a wing needle is to punch a hole into your fabric. It doesn't cut, even though it looks like it has little blades on the side of it. What it does is push the fabric aside. The fabric is going to try to spring back into place at some point. So the only way to hold it open once those blades have pushed is to have the thread pull back on itself. Okay, does that make sense? Like if you go forward a stitch with a wing needle, you need to come back to pull that hole open a little bit. The more you go into the hole and have that thread pull one direction or the other, the larger and more dramatic the hole is going to be. There's also multiple sizes of wing needles. The largest is, I think, a 120 is the biggest one. Then there's like an 18-100 and a 16-90 or something to that effect. The small one is going to be for very, very delicate things that you just want a little texture to. The large one is what I used in these examples. It's going to make very large holes, and it's going to give you a lot more drama. But you'll see in the samples, you know, sometimes a smaller needle will do better. Sometimes a smaller motif size does better. So you'll see those in the examples as we kind of go through. When I look at these, I know that this is not going to work. This is not going to work. And anything that has like an outline like this with these lines or something like this is not going to work. It is a satin stitch pattern. So I'm going to kind of scroll down. And these are satin filled on some level. Those will not work. This is not satin filled, but you know, it's not going to be the right type of pattern. It's got these curves. And remember, those curves are very close together stitches, and my wing needle is very fat. So what happens is you end up eating your fabric if you're punching too many times too close together. Okay, the rest of these are satin stitch right now, and I'm going to keep scrolling down. Those are all satin stitch. These are satin filled. And as I go down, you start to wonder, gee, are there any patterns that are going to work? Well, there you go. There's one right there that looks like it should work because that is a standard heirloom looking stitch. But that's the first example that I used here. And it did give me a little hole here, but it didn't quite do what it was supposed to do here.
Where did you, oh, okay, on that one.
Right, it's this first one. And I'll explain why it didn't do what it was supposed to do. If, remember, the whole point of making a hole is you have to go in and back, right, to pull. This stitch right here is not going, it's going forward, but it's not coming back. So that's why you have this hole here, because you've got, see where it's a little wimpy right in here? These are just single stitches. These are, you know, going to pull the way they're supposed to, but you're lacking that drama you need right here. Okay, so that's the first one. But, you know, just so you know where that is, it's design number 2. You say make current. And, you know, the default size is 6. You can make it larger, you can make it smaller, but if you make it smaller, see that little gap right there? That is, you know, what it's showing you on the screen is literally a gap. If you're going to use a wing needle, you want that to touch too. So you're going to have to play with this, like maybe 6.69. And come up here and click and see if that moves it closer together, right? Maybe 6.65. You might have to hit enter to get it to make the change. And the way to tell if it's touching or overlapping is to touch the B key and zoom in. Don't be fooled because there's a little compensation here. Okay, you need to, you know, go out and see if that's touching. And it is, but when we're in 3D view, let me show you the other reason that that pattern did not work well. See those stitches? See right here, let me get the markers out. Okay, see right here, right here, right here, stitch, stitch, stitch. What I needed it to do was go from here to here and here to here. Okay, not this drop, drop, drop. That's why I didn't get quite what I wanted, and that's, you can see it up here as well. I'm not getting quite what I want because of the way this pattern was made. Okay, and that's, it sounds simple, but it's important that you understand why the stitches work the way they work and what works well. So let me go back to 100%. Okay, so there's line number 1. I suggest that you test stitch some of these and kind of watch it sew. Slow your machine down and watch it sew, and then you'll see what it's doing and you'll understand why it's not working. That'll help you understand how to make, your own motifs better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys have any questions? Shirley, you have any questions?
I want to play.
Okay, no questions. All right, now I'm going to show you the next line.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I have a question that's kind of related to your screen versus the other. How did you get your toolbars all up at the top?
Oh, this has floating toolbars, and if you have a very large screen, like I have a very large screen here, see these little bars?
Uh-huh.
You can drag those down, and you can put them and drop them down here. You can drop them back up here. So what I do is I just moved them everywhere I wanted to go, and and just spread them out across the top.
So you can bring the ones
from the bottom over to the top.
You can bring the ones from the bottom up to the top.
You can also bring them over to the side. See my align bar right here? It was originally down here, I think, and I moved it over to here.
Yes.
And it gives me more room. You can turn these off too. If you go up to view, you can turn off your toolbars. See where it says view and then, toolbars. Mm-hmm. So if you find you're not using something, you can turn it on or off. Or I can't even on or off, right? But they're floating toolbars, so you can move them around. And if you happen to get stuck where you can't get them to park correctly, don't panic, just, take your time and, move them around. Like I always forget, like where these, you can see the bars, but I always forget where they kind of start and stop. And I'm trying to think. I think the lettering toolbar is one that you can move around. That's one. Here's the other toolbar. It depends on your screen. Sometimes you have trouble parking them again, or you park them in the wrong spot like that.
Right.
Okay, don't panic if you do that. Undo is not going to do anything for you. You're going to have to just kind of grab them and pull them and move them over. Okay? And then you can put them back into the place you want them.
Okay.
And you can see what it did. It shifted everything around. And then like I have this little toolbar down here that was over here. So it's not like they disappear. They really don't disappear. They just get moved around. Let me dump this back up here. You can see sometimes you just have trouble grabbing them. And there we go. Okay, so those are floating toolbars, and it just makes it easy to arrange your workspace. Now, I'll tell you a funny story. I got this big computer screen, so I thought, oh, I'll move my icons where I want them to be and yada, yada. And then I forgot where I put them because I was so used to where they were. And I'm going, where is that align toolbar? So, it might take you a little while to adjust to moving the toolbars around. So, all right, so there's line number 1. Now I'm going to go back over here to the motif line and see this square right here? That's telling me where I stopped sewing. If I'm out of the visualizer, which is my 3D view, the one I refer to as the rose-colored glasses, then, I can still see that, block there as well. So if you see this or that red plus symbol, you know that that's where you stop sewing. So rather than start your line over here, which would give you this long jump, start your line in the other direction. Okay? So go from here over. And it does affect how the motifs lay out, but, we're just doing some practice stitches. And then just press enter. Okay, now because I had created this, it defaulted to the motif I had selected. Go to select and then go to your properties. And we're going to change to a different motif. So I'm going to go to select because it's just easier to see, and we know that those stitches were towards the bottom. Okay, there's a French knot, which we don't want. You can use the arrow to scroll up. But, you know, as you're going through these, you're going to start seeing things that begin to look like motif stitches, or not motifs, I'm sorry, heirloom stitches. It's been a long day. Okay, there's the one that I used that ate my fabric. Basically is what it did. It broke my thread. You know, it just was too much of a stitch. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger just so it's easier to see. That's a pretty stitch, isn't it? Okay, now I want to zoom in.
It is.
This is why it didn't do well. Everything was, you know, this part was fine. It created a hole just wonderfully. It was fine. This little tail over here created a hole next to it. So, you know, because it wasn't lined up perfectly, it really caused a little bit of a problem, because think about that needle. It's jammed into this hole a bazillion times, and then you've got this one that's just a little bit off, right? This goes down, and then you've got, you know, it should be pulling over, but if you look really close, these aren't not really perfectly lined up, and it was just too much in here. You know, it just was, you know, it didn't go at the same time. Like, it didn't come in here and then go out to here. It kind of went, you know, there and maybe back and then back down, and, you know, it just wasn't a good logical flow, so it was just too much to handle, and these spaces were too close together. This part would have been probably okay. This is the part where I had trouble, because this spacing in here was too tight. So if my needle, let me try to explain it. Even if I made this bigger, it wouldn't really solve the problem too much. It would look kind of gangly. This space here is too close to each other. These spaces in here, they're just too close. And as my needle's coming down, you know, it's making a hole like this, right? Well, then you've got a hole like this, and a hole, you know, does that make sense? You're eating your fabric with your wing needle, because these are too close together. Okay, does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Okay, so you have to be careful
Yes.
about what you do and what stitches you use. Now, I'm going to leave the rest of the motifs up to you guys to play with that are in the program, because I want to kind of get going on making our own motifs. So I'm going to let you play with those, and you guys can, you know, kind of figure out you know, which ones work and don't work. Take a look at them, and you might be surprised by some of the simpler ones that actually work well. Okay, now, the other thing that you need to know about motifs are, if you have a motif and it doesn't quite line up the way you want, or, you know, maybe you're going around a corner like this, and if you do what I did, just undo it. If you have something selected, when you know, select another thing and click on it, it'll try to change it. Okay, if you're going around a corner, sometimes, depending on the length and the size that you made the motif, you're going to get something up here that you don't quite like. This one turned out pretty good, but really, you know, that's too close together. Select it and go to Reshape. And I'm going to zoom in so you can see what's going on. This is like lettering.
Mm-hmm.
These little diamonds here let me move things around. See this little square? It's going to let me skew it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, just so you know what's going on. But you can see now I can make that point neat. This one is going to let me rotate it, because you might need to rotate something. Okay, see what this square lets me rotate. You know, this diamond that's open lets me skew or resize a little bit, depending on what you want to do. And this is going to move it out of position. Just so you know that those do exist, okay? All right, let me get rid of that.
You have to move them all down, don't you?
Well, if you're going around a corner, like, for example, if you're doing something like this, it's like lettering. You know, sometimes you just get those points and they don't quite match what you want. This is a small pattern. It's not going to give you too much trouble, but picture a larger pattern. like, let's do it this way. Picture a bigger pattern, like, let me see what I can find here. And we'll make this like 20. That might be an interesting pattern to try too for a wing needle.
But you have so many holes.
Right, but see how these are now separated and these are jammed on top of each other? It is very similar to lettering. So, you know, you're going to want to start moving them. You might have to move all of them. You know, personally, I probably would look at maybe resizing, but that's where these tools are going to come into play. See, I can move these around, and, you know, that if I catch one of those dots like that accidentally, don't panic, just undo, because it only undoes one step back. But, you know, maybe I've got like this overlap like that. You know, I can take this one way down and just kind of keep adjusting. And you may, you know, like I said, on this one, you would want to consider resizing, right?
So where did you get that tool?
It is your Reshape tool.
Okay, gotcha. Never mind. Go ahead.
Okay, so, you know, when I get up into here, I'm going to have a problem. So, you know, I would adjust as far down here, but, you know, you can see I've got a lot of play here, see? You know, I might resize, I might stretch that line out a little bit, you know, but I'm going to shift these around, and you know, sometimes you're going to end up doing it one by one. But on this pattern, we were talking about, you know, maybe being a good wing needle design. See, I'm zoomed up like 500% This should be on top of each other. Normally you wouldn't notice it, but you will with a wing needle. And yeah, I would make a lot of holes here, but you would have a little hole here, here. Those would be insignificant holes probably, but this center one would be the one that would be interesting. All right. So something to try. If it were smaller, it'd probably be a little better for the design using a wing needle. Something to note, if you're going to use a wing needle with your machine, turn your thread trimmers off and don't use your needle threader. You're going to have to thread the needle by hand. If you have the Exquisite, you can take the needle out and pretend to automatically thread it, and then put the needle back in and you know, thread that by hand that way. Okay, so before I go to the next section, anybody have any questions?
I'm good.
You guys are all good?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to just delete these.
Yes.
And go on to making our own motifs. And I have to explain this to you, but this is one of the most fun tools that I've used, because it does things that most other programs do not let you do. Most programs require that it be one piece, and you know, like one piece and completely joined together before you can turn it into a motif. This program is going to give you all kinds of control. So you can control your in and out point. You can make multiple pieces to the motif, and then you can tell it what angle and direction it's supposed to stitch in. So you have a lot of control on this. But what we're going to do, let me get into the pictures real quick. Let's see if I can zoom through and find the ones again. Oh yeah, by the way, this is going to be your homework too, Nancy.
I love you.
And maybe this. These are some examples of entree. All right, so that's joining. Okay, see this flower here? Let me zoom in a little bit. I probably should have made it smaller, but I really kind of wanted to show it. And this I needed to perfect a little bit and should have made it smaller. But I also wanted to show you the difference between, you know, changing that design and not changing it. Okay, see the flower? I did use, this is too big, and I probably used too big of a needle, which is why I've got more pull here than what I should have in these two holes, right? But you can see the difference with that center section. It's really popping out, and then I have that hole here as well, correct? And the same thing, like remember our one that ate the fabric? What I did was I had it all enter the hole here, And instead of it, you know, being so close, I made it larger, which is part of the problem. But I would have been okay even if I hadn't, because I was just dropping once and going forward, dropping once and going forward. Yeah, the little daisy design. Okay, yes. And we're going to look at fills a little bit too, but this is a very, very simple pattern, and you can see it makes just the most wonderful fill for wing needle. Those are all holes. The smaller I make that, the more holy the fabric is going to look. This is, I made it a little bit larger just so you could see, which is why I have these little pieces going off to the side. But you can see this pattern does very well. It makes quite, you know, quite large holes. And this one up here, put into a fill pattern, does a little bit better. And I have the holes, the more drama here. You can see just that one drop here is not making too big of a difference. It's this here where those pieces join that I'm getting the best results. And that's because I'm hitting that hole like 6 times, 8 times, I guess, all totaled. So that's what we're going to look at doing right now. So when we make our motif, I'm going to start with some basic things. Let's start with just like a little circle. If I click on the circle, you know, I can just left click and drag, and there's my little circle, right? There's my little satin circle. Mm-hmm. This is going, here's my, you know, start and stop point. If I want, you know, want to put it dead center, I can actually do that. So I'm going to just put it dead center. And, you know, there's where I end. Okay, so I know where I start and where I end. Basically, I'm going to start in the center, and I'm going to end down here. See that square? Now, if I want to make this a motif, it's very, very simple. First, I have to think in terms of what am I going to use it for and how big is this going to end up being most of the time. You don't have to necessarily resize this, but you have to look at some of your settings. So go to your properties, your object details, and, you know, decide. If you're going to keep it at this size generally, then you're probably good here. But if you might shrink it down, you might want to drop your density a little bit, make this a little more open, and you're going to want to check your underlay. Okay, there's edge run and zigzag. That's probably overkill if you're going to make this little. So you might just want to go with an edge run or edge and center. Okay, I'm going to increase my stitch length to 3 for both of these. And then I'm going to say OK. So I've dropped my density a little bit, and I, you know, changed the underlay a little bit because this is solid, and I would try to create this at the size that I'm going to use it. And that's the one thing I forgot to show you. Let's go back to our properties. I can make this any size I want. But if I go to dimensions, and I know that, you know, it's not going to be 6, it's going to be more like 5, then make it at 5. See how it resizes it automatically for me? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm at 5. Now I'm going to, with this selected, I'm going to go to Embroidery, Make Motif. And I'm going to, you know, I can make a new folder. So if I click New, I'm going to make a new folder. Okay? So I've made a new folder. Here's my other folders. I can make as many folders as I want. There's the original one. There's the blackwork one that comes with the program. You know, there's my motif. There's wing needle. You know, so I can make as many folders as I want. But now I have to name this motif. So I'm going to just call it dot 1. And if you plan on making a whole bunch of dots, put 01, dot 01. Okay? Now I say, okay, this has not made my motif yet. It's waiting for me to, if you look all the way down at the bottom here, it says Digitize First Reference Point. This is my little cheater like notes down here. You guys see my mouse moving?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're waiting for that motif made message, you're not going to get it until you say, I want you to start here, and it's supposed to go in this direction. And I'll show you what happens when I do that. Dot 01 has been created. Okay, now I'm going to make a line. And there's my dot line. But let me zoom in. You're going to see something here. I'm going to separate these a little bit too. Hold on. I want to move these apart, so I'm going to make them 7 just so you can kind of see what's going on. See how my fill is and what it's doing? Okay, so I've got those separated now. And let's go out a little bit since we're zoomed in so far. And what I want to show you is how this actually stitches so you get an idea of what happened when I set those reference points. If I set the wrong reference points, I'm going to have jump stitches. So let's go to our little player. Okay, ready? Yeah, just skip past that one. We'll speed you up a little bit. There we go. Now, I want you to watch what this does. See, it's doing my, my little stitches, and there's my little jump up to that one section. See, I have that little jump at that angle because I separated these, right? But I would basically have pretty much no stitches or no jumps if they were touching, right? Okay, does that make sense? See where, it's jumping from here to here.
But can you get rid of the jump?
Not when I separate it like this. If I change them and I put them together, remember I went in and I separated them. I made them bigger than what, further apart. Oh, I always forget I have to select them. Hold on. Okay, so if I go in here and see my motif size is 5 and my spacing is 7. That's causing space in between here.
Right.
Okay, so that's why I have that jump. Now, if I want a little straighter jump, I have to think about what it's doing. See my fill angle? See how that angle's going this way?
Right.
I would have to change how that motif was made. I would have to select it, go into embroidery, make motif, and, I can go back to, DigiClasses, and let's make this dot 01 again. I can replace it if I don't like the way it looks. Say OK. It tells me that already exists. I'm going to overwrite it. And then I would say, you know what, I want you to start here, and I want you to end here. See how I drew that angle? And now, you select this, go back in and change those settings. Ay, ay, ay. Did you ever have one of those days? Hold on. I'm telling you, there we are. Okay, there's my motif, but I'm going to separate these again. I'm going to make them wider. And let me click on that. Okay, see, changing that changed where that jump goes, right? See the jump now, Nancy?
Right.
Because I changed it. To get that even, I'd have to not go quite at such a severe angle.